The cabin door was 5 minutes from closing. In seat 1A, a man was checking his email. In the aisle, a woman with a diamond bracelet was refusing to sit in 3B. "You're in my seat," she spat at him, her voice dripping with entitlement. The man looked up, his face calm. "My boarding pass says 1A. The flight attendant, seeing the woman's platinum card and the man's quiet demeanor, made a fatal choice. "Sir, to avoid a delay, would you mind moving?" The man looked at the attendant, then at the woman, and simply said, "No." When the woman shrieked for security, the man made a single phone call. 5 minutes later, the captain's voice came on the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, this flight is grounded." The man wasn't just a passenger. He was the black CEO who owned the airline, and he was about to teach them all a lesson in karma. The atmosphere in the first-class lounge of Apex Air at JFK Terminal 4 was a familiar hum of strained quiet. It was the sound of important people pointedly ignoring other important people, a symphony of clicking laptop keys, hushed but forceful phone calls, and the clinking of heavy glassware. Julian Vance sat in a corner, observing. To anyone glancing, he was just another traveller. He wore dark, well-fitted jeans, a simple charcoal grey cashmere sweater, and a pair of discreet Oliver Peoples glasses. His only luggage was a sleek, black leather duffel that probably cost more than the armchair he was sitting in, but it bore no logos. Julian Vance didn't need logos. At 44, he was the new majority stakeholder and CEO of Apex Air Holdings, the parent company of the very airline he was about to fly. He was 2 months into the job, having bought a controlling interest after a hostile takeover, and he was still in his listening tour phase. He flew commercial, often unannounced, to see the rot for himself. And he always found it. He saw the gate agent, Sandra, give a strained smile to a passenger. He saw the lounge bartender pour a watered-down premium whiskey. He saw the priority boarding line already clogged with people who clearly weren't in Group 1. It was sloppy. A voice, sharp as a breaking wine glass, cut through the lounge's murmur. "This is unacceptable. I explicitly told your agent on the phone that I required a bulkhead window." Bulkhead. Do you people not understand English? Julian looked up. A woman in her late 50s, Caroline Harding, was berating the lounge attendant. She was the archetype of old money, from her blonde hair, shellacked into a perfect helmet, to her Chanel handbag and the clacking diamond bracelet on her wrist. "Ma'am," the attendant said, "I see you are in 3B, which is an excellent aisle seat." "I don't want an aisle seat. I paid for a window. I am a platinum elite, million-miler," she said, tapping her metallic blue card on the desk, as if knighting the poor woman. "Now fix it." "Boarding has already commenced, Mrs. Harding. The system is locked. I'm afraid you'll have to speak to the gate agent." "Useless." "Utterly useless," Caroline muttered, snatching her card back. She pivoted and marched out of the lounge, her heels clicking an angry rhythm on the marble floor. Julian sighed, finished his water, and followed a few minutes later. At gate B37, the chaos was predictable. The flight, Apex 815 to London Heathrow, was in the final stages of boarding. Caroline Harding was at the gate desk, in a heated discussion with Sandra, the agent. "This is your mistake, and you will correct it," Caroline demanded. Sandra, clearly at the end of her rope, just wanted the flight gone. "Ma'am, the cabin is full. There are no other seats to move you to. Please board. You are holding up the line." "This is not over," Caroline hissed, but she finally scanned her pass and marched down the jet bridge, a woman on a mission. Julian was next. He scanned his pass. Beep. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Vance," Sandra said, her eyes already on the next passenger. His pass clearly said, "Vance, J, seat 1A." He was a paying customer, booked under his own name. He wasn't hiding. He was simply unannounced. He walked down the jet bridge. He stepped onto the aircraft. "Good evening," he said to the flight attendant at the door. She was a young woman named Beth, her name tag slightly crooked. "Welcome aboard," she chirped, not looking up from her passenger manifest. Julian turned left into the first-class cabin. The pod-like seats were angled herringbone, and his, 1A, was the coveted front-row bulkhead on the left, offering the most privacy and space. He slid his duffel under the ottoman and settled in. He took a cleansing breath. 7 hours of peace, he hoped. He needed to review the Q3 reports from the London office. He pulled out his phone to send a final email before the door closed. He was so focused, he didn't notice Caroline Harding stalking the aisle, her eyes scanning the seat numbers. She had passed her assigned 3B and was now standing at the front of the cabin, her face contorting in rage. She looked at the empty 1D, then at Julian in 1A. She strode over and stopped, looming over him. Julian, sensing a shadow, looked up. "Excuse me," Caroline snapped. Julian removed his glasses. "Yes? You're in my seat." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Julian, ever calm, held up his boarding pass, which he hadn't yet put away. "I'm sorry, I believe this is 1A. "And I'm telling you, it is my seat," she said, her voice rising. "I am Platinum Elite. I always sit in 1A. There has been a mistake, and you need to move." Julian looked at her. He saw the Chanel bag, the diamonds, the perfectly manisiled nails. He saw the absolute, unshakable conviction that she was right, that her desire was fact. And he saw the way her eyes flicked over him, his dark skin, his simple sweater, his quiet demeanor, and dismissed him. He was, in her eyes, an obstacle, an error. "Ma'am," Julian said, his voice even and low, "my pass says 1A. I am in 1A. Perhaps your seat is further back." "Don't be ridiculous," she scoffed. "Are you even sure you're in the right cabin? They must have scanned your pass incorrectly." The implication hung in the air, thick and toxic. "You don't belong here." Julian's jaw tightened. "I am quite sure." "Beth!" Caroline shrieked, waving her hand. The young flight attendant scurried over. "Yes, Mrs. Harding? Is there a problem?" Beth had clearly been warned. "Yes, there's a problem. This man," she said, gesturing to Julian, as if he were a piece of misplaced luggage, "is in my seat. I told the lounge. I told the gate. Now I am telling you. Fix it." Beth looked at Julian, her expression pleading. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Julian held it up. Beth leaned in. He's in 1A, ma'am. That's correct." "And what does mine say?" Caroline thrust her pass at Beth. "This says 3B, ma'am." "Then the system is wrong," Caroline was shouting now. Passengers in the back of the cabin were craning their necks. "I am not sitting in 3B. I am sitting here. Tell him to move." "Ma'am, I can't do that," Beth whispered, terrified. "He is a ticketed passenger in that seat." "Then what?" Caroline said, her voice dropping to a dangerous hiss. "Are you good for? Get your supervisor." Beth fled to the galley and returned a moment later with Mark, the senior purser. Mark was in his late 40s, with a polished veneer that had seen thousands of these minor on-board dramas. He was all practiced smiles and calm, authoritative energy. "Good evening, Mrs. Harding," Mark said, his voice smooth. "A pleasure to have you with us again. Beth tells me there's some confusion over your seating." "There is no confusion, Mark," Caroline snapped. "There is a mistake. I am meant to be in 1A. This person," she again refused to call Julian a man, "is in it. My back requires the bulkhead. I cannot be in row 3. It's a medical necessity." This was a new tactic. The medical claim. Julian almost smiled. It was textbook. Mark turned to Julian. The practiced smile remained, but his eyes were calculating. He saw a black man in a sweater. He saw a white woman in Chanel. He did the math of least resistance. "Sir," Mark began, "my name is Mark. I'm the purser for this flight. I understand this is your assigned seat, but Mrs. Harding is one of our most valued flyers, and she has a preference for this seat. We seem to have a conflict." "There is no conflict," Julian stated simply. "I am in my seat. She is not. She is standing in the aisle, delaying this flight." Mark's smile faltered. Julian wasn't being apologetic or intimidated. This complicated the easy solution. "Sir," Mark tried again, lowering his voice, "I am trying to get this flight out on time. I am authorized to offer you a $300 travel voucher for the inconvenience if you would be willing to exchange seats with Mrs. Harding and take 3B. It's just a few rows back, still first class." The cabin was quiet. Everyone was listening. Julian felt the eyes of the other passengers on him. He felt their collective impatience. They didn't care who was right. They just wanted to go. They wanted him to be the nice guy and give in. Julian looked at Mark. "Let me be perfectly clear. You are asking me, the passenger who is correctly ticketed and seated, to move, to appease her, the passenger who is incorrectly standing in the aisle and yelling?" Mark's professionalism was cracking. "Sir, I'm just trying to find a solution." "You are rewarding her behavior," Julian said, his voice still low, but now with a sharp edge of steel. "You are telling her that if she yells loud enough, she gets whatever she wants. And you are telling me that my ticket is conditional. The answer is no, I will not be moving." Caroline let out a sound of pure indignation. "This is outrageous. He's being difficult. He's assaulting me." "I have not moved, spoken, or touched you, ma'am," Julian said, looking back at his phone. "You are the one creating this scene." "He's being aggressive," she shrieked at Mark. "He threatened me. I don't feel safe. Mark, you must remove him. He is a security threat." This was the magic word. Security threat. Beth, the junior attendant, gasped. Mark's face went pale. This had escalated beyond a seating dispute. A passenger claiming to feel unsafe required a new protocol. "Sir," Mark said, his tone now hard, "the passenger has made a claim that she feels threatened by you." Julian looked up from his phone, his eyes cold. "And you, as the purser, are validating that claim? A claim she made up, right in front of you, because I refuse to give her my seat? Is that the official position of Apex Air?" Mark was trapped. If he backed down, Caroline would claim he ignored a security threat. If he escalated, he'd be removing a passenger from his correct seat. He made the choice he'd been trained to make his whole career: appease the loudest, most valuable customer. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to gather your things and come with me to the galley." "No," Julian said. "I am not moving. I am a paying passenger in my assigned seat, and I have done nothing wrong. She is the one causing the disturbance. Handle her." "He's refusing!" Caroline cried, victorious. "He's non-compliant. Get security. Get him off this plane." Mark, seeing no other way out, nodded to Beth. "Call the gate. Tell them we need assistance. Passenger non-compliance." Julian watched Beth hurry away. He looked at Mark, who refused to meet his gaze. He looked at Caroline, who was smirking, already reaching to pull her own bag into the overhead bin above 1A. She thought she had won. "You've made a terrible mistake," Julian said quietly. "Just get out," Caroline hissed at him. "People like you always try to play the victim." 2 minutes later, 2 airport security officers, not police, but the uniformed contract guards for the terminal, stepped onto the plane. "This is the one," Mark said, pointing at Julian. "Pointing. He's refusing to leave his seat and is causing a disturbance." "Sir," the first guard said, a beefy man named Johnson. "We're going to have to ask you to come with us." Julian looked at the guard, at the smirking woman, at the spineless purser. He had seen enough. The rot was deep. "Very well," Julian said. He didn't stand up. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "What's he doing?" Caroline said, impatient. "Just drag him out." Julian held up one finger, silencing the entire cabin. He unlocked his phone and hit a single number on his favorites list. The call connected on the first ring. "Jessica, it's Julian Vance." His voice was perfectly calm. There was no hello, no preamble. The security guards paused. The name Julian Vance meant nothing to them. But the tone. The tone was absolute authority. "I'm on Apex Flight 815, Gate B37, JFK. I need you to do 2 things for me right now." Caroline rolled her eyes. "Oh, who are you calling? Your lawyer? They can't help you, buddy. You're getting off this plane." Julian ignored her, his eyes locked on Mark, the purser. "First," Julian continued into the phone, "I want you to call Central Operations. I want you to give them a code, 0 tolerance. That's the authorization. Ground this flight, effective immediately." Mark's blood turned to ice. Code 0 tolerance. That was a code he'd only read about in operations manuals. It wasn't for weather. It wasn't for maintenance. It was the CEO-level code for a catastrophic operational or security failure. It meant stop everything. "Grounded," Caroline scoffed. "You can't ground a flight. What a lunatic." "Second, Jessica," Julian said, his voice dropping. "Get me Captain Miller on the cockpit line. Patch him through to my cell, now." The security guard, Johnson, looked at his partner. This was wildly outside their drunk passenger script. Mark, shaking, stepped forward. "Sir, who are you?" Julian held up his hand as his phone buzzed. He clicked over. "Captain Miller." The cabin was so quiet they could hear the faint, tinny voice of the pilot on the other end. "This is Captain Miller. Who is this?" "Captain," Julian said, his voice now a command. "This is Julian Vance. I am the CEO of Apex Air Holdings. I am currently seated in 1A on your aircraft." A dead, profound silence filled the cabin. Caroline Harding's smug, victorious smirk didn't just fade. It shattered. Her face went ashen. Beth, the junior attendant, brought her hand to her mouth, a small O escaping. Mark, the purser, looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. His skin was waxy, and a fine sheen of sweat popped up on his forehead. "Sir." The captain's voice was now sharp, alert. Yes, sir. I'm getting a high-level alert from operations right now. A 0 tolerance grounding. Is that from you?" "That is correct, Captain," Julian said. "We have a critical operational failure and a severe breach of protocol in the first-class cabin. A passenger has been threatened, and your crew has not only failed to de-escalate, they have sided with the aggressor. I am invoking a 0 tolerance. Safety and compliance review. You are not to close the main cabin door. You are not to disengage the jet bridge. This flight is grounded, effective immediately, pending my direct, personal authorization. Do you copy?" "Yes, Mr. Vance," the captain replied instantly. "Copied. We are holding at the gate. The door will remain open. What do you require?" "I require you to stay put. I'll handle it from here," Julian said, and hung up. He put his phone down on the armrest. He looked at the 2 security guards. "Gentlemen, your services are no longer required for me." He then turned his gaze to Mark. "You, purser. What is your name?" Mark Jennings, sir," he stammered. "Mark Jennings. You and flight attendant. Beth. You are relieved of duty. Effective immediately." "Sir, "You are not to speak," Julian commanded, his voice not loud, but it filled the cabin. "You witnessed a passenger, Mrs. Harding, attempt to force a ticketed passenger from his seat. You witnessed her make false claims of medical necessity. You witnessed her make veiled, discriminatory remarks, and when I rightfully refused to give up my seat, you tried to bribe me. When that failed, you validated her false claim of feeling unsafe and called security to have me, the victim, removed." He was disassembling the man's entire professional life, one sentence at a time. "You failed. You failed your training. You failed your duty of care. And you failed this airline." He then turned his cold, furious gaze on the woman who started it all. Caroline Harding was frozen. The color had drained from her face, leaving only her makeup, a garish mask of shock. "Mrs. Harding," Julian said. She tried to speak. I didn't know, You didn't know what? That the black man in the sweater you were trying to bully was the man who owns the plane. No, it was a mistake. The gate agent." "There was no mistake," Julian said. "My pass was correct. Your pass was correct. You simply decided that what you wanted was more important than reality. You decided that your platinum card gave you the right to harass another passenger. You assumed," he leaned in slightly, "that I didn't belong here. And this crew," he gestured to Mark and Beth, "they assumed the same thing." Julian looked back at the security guards. "Gentlemen, my orders have changed. Escort this woman," he pointed directly at Caroline, "off my aircraft. She is a non-compliant passenger. She is trespassing." The security guard, Johnson, didn't hesitate. He had his new orders, and they came from a source far higher than the purser. "Ma'am, please gather your belongings. You need to come with us." Caroline's shock finally broke, replaced by a desperate, sputtering rage. "No, you can't. This is absurd. I am a customer. I am a platinum member. My husband is David Harding. He runs Harding Capital. We have a corporate account. You cannot do this." "I can," Julian said. "And I am. You are a disturbance. You are a liability. And you are, as of this moment, no longer welcome on Apex Air. This is discrimination. This is because I'm a woman," she shrieked. "This is a consequence," Julian replied, his voice flat. "You slandered me. You lied to the crew. And you attempted to have me forcibly removed from a flight because you didn't get the window seat you wanted. Now, you will be removed. I'll sue you. I'll sue this whole airline. You'll be ruined. You'll be hearing from my lawyers." "I look forward to it," Julian said. He turned to the guards. "Now." Johnson and his partner took her by the arms. She wasn't just being asked. She was being removed. "Get your hands off me. This is assault. You'll rue this day," she hissed, her face contorted. As they physically pulled her past seat 1A, she spat at Julian. You thug!" The word hung in the air. The final, desperate venom of a woman who had lost all power. Julian just watched her, his expression unreadable. The guards dragged her up the aisle and onto the jet bridge. The entire cabin, first, business, and even economy passengers who were craning their necks, watched in stunned silence. A moment later, the PA system clicked on. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miller. We do apologize for the disturbance. We are currently holding at the gate due to an operational review. We will provide an update as soon as we have one." The entire plane let out a collective, frustrated groan. This grounding wasn't just for Caroline, it was for everyone. A man in 2C, who had been watching the whole thing, leaned over. He was a businessman in a suit. "Hey pal, look, she was a nightmare. We all saw it. But you grounded the whole flight? You're delaying hundreds of people just because she was rude to you? Seems excessive. Julian turned his attention to the man, and then to the other passengers in the first-class cabin who were looking at him with a mixture of awe and annoyance. He stood up. "My apologies to all of you," Julian said, his voice projecting through the cabin. "And my apologies to every passenger on this aircraft. My name is Julian Vance, and I am the new CEO of this airline. This delay is not my first choice, but it is a necessary one." He gestured toward the galley, where Mark and Beth were standing, pale and trembling. What you just witnessed was not a simple passenger dispute. It was a failure of our culture. It was a demonstration of a rot within my company that I am here to fix. You saw a crew, my crew, who were willing to discriminate against a ticketed passenger, he tapped his own chest, and attempt to remove him from his rightful seat to appease another passenger who was simply louder, who they perceived as more valuable. He looked at Mark. "The policy is clear. The ticket is the contract. 1A was mine. 3B was hers. His job," he pointed at Mark, "was to enforce that. His job was to tell Mrs. Harding to take her seat or be removed. He failed. He chose prejudice, or at best, professional cowardice, over policy." "So yes, this flight is grounded," Julian continued. "Because this crew," he looked at Mark and Beth, "is not qualified to fly this plane. They are not qualified to make safety decisions, because they cannot even make a simple policy decision. They are a liability. They will be replaced. That is why we are delayed." He looked at Mark and Beth, his expression now one of professional finality. "Get your things, both of you. An operations manager and HR representative will be meeting you at the jet bridge. Your IDs are revoked, pending a full investigation." Beth burst into tears. Mark just nodded, his face slack with shock. They looked like ghosts as they gathered their personal items from the galley, did the walk of shame past Julian, and stepped off the plane. Julian sat back down in 1A. He pulled out his phone again. The man in 2C just shook his head. "Wow, okay, I get it. Wow." Julian hit his contacts. "Jessica, get me Robert Mancini. Yes, the president of US operations. I don't care what time it is in Chicago. Get him on the line. And I need a replacement purser and flight attendant for Apex 815 at B37 JFK immediately." He was just getting started. The next 30 minutes were a masterclass in executive action. Julian Vance, from the comfort of seat 1A, began to dismantle and rebuild the operational chain that had failed him. "Robert," Julian said, when the president of US operations finally came on the line, his voice thick with sleep. "Julian, what's wrong? It's 10 p.m. What's wrong, Robert, is that I was almost forcibly removed from my own aircraft at JFK by my own crew. That's what's wrong." Julian recounted the events, his voice a low, clipped monotone. He didn't embellish. He didn't need to. The facts were damning enough. On the other end of the line, Robert Mancini went from sleepy to mortified. "My God, Julian, I'm speechless. I'm getting on the first plane to New York. I'll handle it personally." "No," Julian said. "You'll handle it now. I want the terminal manager, the gate agent Sandra, and the 2 security supervisors for Johnson and his partner in a conference room in 1 hour. I want to know why their first instinct is to escalate, not de-escalate. I want to know why the purser's word is enough to have a paying passenger physically confronted." "Yes, sir. Right away." "What about the flight?" "I've grounded it. I'm waiting for a new crew. This flight will be delayed by, I estimate, 3 hours, which means we've missed our landing slot at Heathrow. I'll get the operations team to secure a new one." "You do that," Julian said. "And Robert, pull the file on Caroline Harding, Platinum Elite. Find her husband, David Harding, of Harding Capital. I want to know the size of that corporate account. I'll be calling him personally. Julian, the account it's substantial, over $10 million a year. Good, Julian said. Then he'll definitely take my call. He hung up. The plane was a pressure cooker. The air conditioning had recycled the same stale, tense air for an hour. Passengers were complaining. Babies were crying. The new reality of a 3-hour delay was setting in. Finally, the new crew arrived. A crisp, older purser named David stepped on board, his face a mask of hyper-professionalism. He walked straight to 1A. Mr. Vance, I'm David. I'll be your purser for this flight. We are deeply sorry for the experience you have had. David, Julian said, just get this plane in the air, safely, and treat every passenger with respect. That's all I ask. Yes, sir. David immediately went to the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your new purser, David. Captain Miller has informed me we have a new landing slot at Heathrow. We are fueling for the revised flight plan and will be closing the main cabin door in 10 minutes. Our crew will be passing through the cabin with refreshments. We sincerely apologize for this extensive delay. We, and Apex Air, will do better. It was the right message, calm, apologetic, and forward-moving. The flight finally took off, 3 hours and 20 minutes late. Julian did not sleep. He worked. He drank black coffee. He typed emails at a furious pace. The new crew treated him with the terrified deference one would reserve for a king visiting a plague-ridden village. Meanwhile, on the ground, the karma for Caroline Harding was just beginning. When she was escorted to the gate, she was met by Sandra, the gate agent, who was now accompanied by the terminal manager. Mrs. Harding, the manager said, we are processing a full refund for your ticket. A refund? I don't want a refund. I want to be on that plane. I want him arrested. That will not be possible, the manager said, his voice cold. He'd just gotten off the phone with his boss, who had just gotten off the phone with Robert Mancini. The chain of terror was efficient. Furthermore, we have been instructed by Apex Corporate to inform you that your A Advantage account and Platinum status have been suspended, pending review. Suspended? You can't? And, the manager continued, due to your belligerence and your physical actions against the crew. He was bluffing, but she had been yelling and gesturing. We have filed a non-compliance report. You are banned from JFK Terminal 4. This hit her harder than the flight ban. This is... I'm calling my husband. She stormed off, dialing her phone. The real karma, however, was for Mark and Beth. They were sitting in a windowless HR room. The investigation was short. Did you, the HR rep asked, ask Mr. Vance to move from his ticketed seat? Yes, but, Mark began. And did you, the rep continued, call security on him when he refused? Mrs. Harding claimed she felt unsafe. Did you feel he was a threat, Mark? Mark was silent. He hadn't. He had just wanted the problem to go away. You're suspended, both of you, without pay, indefinitely, pending a full review by the FAA and corporate. Hand over your badges. Beth's career, barely begun, was over. Mark's 20-year run of seniority and privilege was gone, all because they took the easy way out. The plane landed at Heathrow at 11:00 a.m., hours late. As passengers deplaned, many of them, the ones who had heard his speech, nodded to Julian. The man in 2C gave him a small salute. Well handled, boss. Julian was met at the gate, not by a car, but by his London-based executive team. They had been tracking the incident all night. His reputation had preceded him. He was no longer just the new CEO. He was the man who grounded his own flight. He was decisive. He was ruthless. and to the rank and file he was fair. But the story wasn't over. A passenger in business class, a well-known tech journalist named Sarah Jenkins, had recognized Julian after he made the call. She hadn't heard his speech, but she had seen the woman removed. She had seen the crew replaced. She had spent the last 4 hours of the flight piecing the story together from other passengers. By the time Julian was in his car heading to the London office, her story had hit the web. Headline: Apex Air CEO grounds own flight at JFK after racist. Passenger demands his seat. The story went viral. It was picked up by every major news outlet. By noon, Caroline Harding was trending on Twitter. The brief, blurry video clips passengers had taken of her yelling, of her being escorted off, were everywhere. She was the new Karen, a global symbol of white entitlement. The karma that followed was swift and brutal, far beyond anything Julian could have orchestrated. David Harding, her husband, woke up to 100 Google alerts and a call from his head of PR. The Harding Capital corporate account with Apex Air wasn't just 10 million talos. It was their primary carrier for all executive travel. His call to Julian Vance was not the one he'd expected to make. "Mr. Vance," David said, his voice strained. "David Harding, I've seen the news. On behalf of my wife, I am profoundly apologetic. Her behavior was inexcusable, appalling." "It was," Julian agreed. I hope this won't affect our corporate relationship. Caroline, she's not herself." "Mr. Harding," Julian said, "your wife, herself, attempted to have me arrested because I wouldn't give her a seat she didn't pay for. She racially profiled me, and she put my crew in an impossible position, one they failed. As for our corporate relationship, I'm having my team review all of our contracts. We're in the business of aviation, not in the business of catering to the whims of abusive passengers, regardless of who they're married to." David Harding was silent. He knew what that meant. He was, at minimum, going to pay a premium. More likely, he'd be forced to move to a competitor, one that would not be happy to get Apex's cast-offs. "I understand," he said, defeated. But for Caroline, it was worse. The 2 charity boards she sat on, the Museum Ball Committee and the Children's Literacy Fund, both called her within the hour. "Caroline, dear," the chairwoman of the museum board said, "given the unfortunate publicity, we think it's best if you step back for the good of the fund." She was toxic. Her people, the ones she threatened Julian with, were an illusion. They didn't exist. Her status was, like her platinum card, a privilege, not a right, and it had just been revoked. She was blacklisted from Apex, and as Julian had instructed Jessica, Apex Air was part of the Global Sky Alliance. When he black-flagged her account, he added the note, "Passenger belligerence, crew interference, and safety threat." Every partner airline, from Lufthansa to Singapore Airlines, was now alerted. She wouldn't be able to fly first class on any reputable airline. She was, in effect, grounded from the world she had so desperately tried to cling to. The incident on Apex 815 was no longer just an incident. It was a line in the sand. Within the company, it became known simply as the B-37 Review, a phrase that would send a shiver down the spine of any employee, from the executive suites to the baggage handlers. Julian Vance did not just fire 2 employees. He used the event as a fulcrum to pivot the entire 40,000-person company. The rot, as he'd called it, was being systematically cauterized. His first act was to tear up the existing passenger conflict training manual. It was a 200-page document full of corporate speak about de-escalation, finding synergies, and appeasement models. It was, in his words, a manual for cowards. He replaced it with a single 10-page digital module, mandatory for all 40,000 employees. It was titled, "The Contract and the Consequence." In a windowless training room at the JFK crew base, a new class of flight attendants was watching the module's primary video. It was the full, unedited security footage from Flight 815. The trainees, all young and eager, squirmed in their seats. They watched Caroline Harding's initial confrontation. They saw her false medical necessity claim. They heard Mark Jennings's voice, smooth and practiced, offer Julian the $300 bribe. They saw Julian's unshakable calm. And then they saw the moment that made them all gasp. Mark, his face pale and set, pointing at the seated Julian and telling security, "This is the one." The instructor, a 30-year veteran purser named Gwen, paused the video. "This," she said, her voice sharp, "is the moment a 20-year career ended. This is the moment a multi-million-dollar lawsuit was born. This is the moment our airline failed. Why?" A young man in the front row raised his hand. He failed to de-escalate." "Wrong," Gwen snapped. "He chose to de-escalate with the wrong person. He tried to appease the aggressor. He saw a platinum card and a Chanel bag, and he saw a black man in a sweater. He made a value judgment. He bet on the wrong horse. At Apex Air, we no longer bet." We read. She clicked to the next slide. It showed a picture of a boarding pass. "This is the contract," it read. "Your job," Gwen continued, "is not to be a diplomat. It is not to be a therapist. It is to be an enforcer of the contract. The ticket is the contract. Policy is the great equalizer. It is your shield. It protects you from the Caroline Hardings of the world, and it protects the Julian Vances." Gwen advanced to the next slide, titled "The New Protocol." The old way was to find a compromise. The new way is to state the fact. "Ma'am, your seat is 3B. Sir, your seat is 1A. Please take your assigned seat." If they refuse, you do not bribe the other passenger. You do not negotiate. You inform them they are in violation of federal crew instructions and will be removed. You repeat it once. If they do not comply, you call security and have them removed. No debate. No discussion. Just contract and consequence. Another trainee looked nervous. "But what about the bad publicity? What if we remove a 1,000,000-miler and they blast us on social media?" Gwen almost smiled. "That," she said, "brings us to Mr. Mark Jennings." While this new training was being rolled out, Mark Jennings was in a different, much more expensive room. He was sitting in the plush Manhattan office of Arthur Klein, a high-profile employment lawyer with a reputation for bloody public fights. "Mark, your life is ruined," Klein said, steepling his fingers. Mark, who hadn't slept in days, just nodded, his face a mask of sallow defeat. "You're a 20-year veteran, a senior purser. You were fired on the spot, humiliated, and made a global scapegoat by a cowboy CEO on a power trip. You're broke. You're blacklisted. You are, for all intents and purposes, the perfect victim." "But I did offer the bribe," Mark mumbled. "And I did call security on him." "Details," Klein said, waving his hand dismissively. "You were managing an unstable situation. You had one passenger, Harding, who was hysterical, a clear medical or emotional issue. You had another Vance, who was non-compliant and refusing crew instructions when you asked him to the galley. You were trapped. What was the real reason you were fired, Mark?" I don't know. "Of course you do," Klein said, leaning in. "You're a middle-aged white man. He's a new, aggressive, black CEO. He didn't fire the young, female flight attendant, Beth, did he?" "No, he fired you. The authority figure. This wasn't about policy, Mark. This was about optics. This was a lynching, corporate style. He wanted a scalp to prove he was in charge. He wanted to make an example. This is a clear-cut case of reverse discrimination and wrongful termination. Mark sat up. A flicker of hope, or perhaps just vengeance, lit his eyes. He did ground the whole plane, just for him. That's an abuse of power. Exactly, Klein smiled. And we are going to try this case in the court of public opinion first. 2 days later, Mark Jennings was on the #1 rated cable news show, The Crossfire with Megan Cross. Megan Cross, known for her sharp, combative style, introduced him with sympathetic, dripping outrage. "Mark Jennings," she said, "a 20-year flight attendant, a man who has dedicated his life to passenger safety. And his reward? Fired, humiliated, and blacklisted by a billionaire woke CEO, who, by his own admission, grounded a 300-passenger plane, costing the company millions, all because his ego was bruised." She turned to Mark. "Mark, tell us, what really happened in that cabin?" Mark, well rehearsed by Klein, looked into the camera, his eyes brimming with practiced tears. "Megan, I was just trying to do my job. I was trying to de-escalate. I had a passenger, Mrs. Harding, who was clearly unwell. And I had Mr. Vance, who was difficult, aggressive. When I tried to speak with him, he refused. He created a hostile environment. When I was forced to call for assistance, he made a phone call. He grounded the plane. He looked at me, and he fired me, because I was a white man, and he needed to make a point. He ruined my life to send a message." The narrative exploded. Billionaire bully. Woke CEO's power trip. Reverse discrimination at 30,000 feet. The Apex air stock, which had climbed, began to wobble. The PR department was in a full-blown panic. Social media, which had celebrated Julian's boss move, was now questioning his methods. Had he gone too far? Was he a hero or just another out-of-touch billionaire a-hole? In the Apex boardroom, the atmosphere was funereal. Robert Mancini, the president of operations, and Sarah Chen, the head of communications, were staring at a screen of plummeting social media sentiment. "Julian, this is a disaster," Sarah said, pacing. "Klein is brilliant. He's painted Mark as the victim and you as the villain. David versus Goliath. And we are Goliath. The reverse discrimination angle is sticking. We need to settle. We need to make this go away." Julian Vance, who had been standing at the window overlooking the Chicago skyline, turned around. His face was calm. "He's lying." "Of course he's lying," Sarah shot back. "But he's sympathetic. He's a blue-collar worker. You're a CEO who just bought a controlling interest. You can't win this fight." "Yes, we can," Julian said, "because Goliath has a video camera." He looked at Sarah. "Book a press conference. Book the biggest ballroom at the Hilton. Invite everyone, every major network, every newspaper. And I want Megan Cross in the front row. We're not going to make this go away. We're going to end it." The next day, the ballroom was packed. It was the biggest corporate PR event of the year. Julian Vance walked onto the stage alone. No podium, just a single chair and a massive screen behind him. He sat down. He wore a simple dark suit. "Good morning. Thank you for coming." His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "We are here today because of a lie. A very public lie, told by a former employee, Mr. Mark Jennings. He claims he was a victim. He claims he was fired for his race. He claims I was the aggressor. He claims he was just doing his job. I am not here today to tell you he is lying. I am here to show you." The giant screen lit up. "Let's start at the beginning," Julian said. "This is Mrs. Caroline Harding at our gate, 30 minutes before the flight. Mr. Jennings claimed she was just unwell." The screen played the audio from the gate agent's desk. Caroline's voice, sharp and venomous. "This is unacceptable. I paid for a window. Do you people not understand English? Useless. Utterly useless." The press corps scribbled. "This," Julian said, "is not an unwell passenger. This is an aggressive passenger with a clear pattern of behavior." "Next," Julian said, "the cabin. Mr. Jennings claims I was aggressive and non-compliant." The screen split. One side showed the cabin footage. The other showed a new angle, a high-def file from the bulkhead camera. They saw Julian calmly show his pass. They heard Caroline's escalating shrieks. "Now watch Mr. Jennings's de-escalation technique," Julian said. The audio was crystal clear. "Authorized to offer you a $300 travel voucher for the inconvenience." Mr. Jennings's first move, Julian narrated, was not to enforce policy. It was not to tell Mrs. Harding to take her seat. It was to try and bribe me, the correct passenger, to appease the incorrect one. Is that de-escalation, or is that rewarding an aggressor? The room was silent. "But now," Julian said, his voice dropping, "we come to the central lie of Mr. Jennings's claim. He claims I was the threat. He claims Mrs. Harding felt unsafe. Let's watch the moment he made that security judgment." He played the clip. Caroline shrieking, "I don't feel safe. He's aggressive." "Please," Julian said, "watch me. The aggressor." On the screen, Julian Vance was sitting perfectly still, looking at his phone. He hadn't moved. He hadn't spoken. "I am sitting. I am not moving. I am not speaking," Julian narrated, his voice like ice. "Now watch Mrs. Harding lie. And now, watch Mr. Jennings validate her lie and call security. He was the one with the power, and he aimed it at the wrong person." "Finally," Julian said, "Mr. Jennings claims he was just calling for assistance. He claims he was trapped. Let's listen to the actual audio file from his call to the gate." The audio played. Beth's panicked voice. "He's refusing." And then Mark's, cold and final. "Just call them. Tell them passenger non-compliance. Tell them we need him removed." The audio ended. Julian stood up. "Mr. Jennings did not call for assistance. He called for my removal. He'd lied to the gate. He lied to security. And he lied to all of you. He did not identify the real threat, Mrs. Harding. He identified the victim, me. He wasn't fired for his race. He was fired for his cowardice. He was fired for his incompetence. He was fired because he failed his one job, to protect all passengers, not just the ones who look like him." He looked directly at Megan Cross in the front row. Mr. Jennings' 20 years of service were 20 years of training. He had 2 decades to learn how to do his job. He proved in 2 minutes that he never had. At Apex Air, we no longer make that choice. We are done with that culture. Your status gets you a better seat, not a different set of rules. "Thank you. I will not be taking questions." Julian Vance walked off the stage. The fallout was instantaneous. By the time he was back in his car, Arthur Klein had retracted the lawsuit and issued a public apology. Megan Cross was forced to air a humiliating, on-air retraction of her reverse discrimination story. Mark Jennings was not just a pariah, he was a national symbol of incompetence. He would never work in aviation or any service industry again. The stock for Apex Air Holdings didn't just rebound, it soared to an all-time high. Passengers wanted to fly an airline with a backbone. Bookings, especially from business travelers tired of Karen incidents, spiked 30%. But Julian's work wasn't quite done. Beth, the junior flight attendant, was brought in. She had been on indefinite, unpaid suspension. "You froze," Julian said to her, not unkindly. He was in his office. not a boardroom. Yes, sir, she whispered, crying. I was scared. Of her, of Mark. He was my senior. I was trained to defer. You were trained wrong, Julian said. You had a choice. You could have backed the policy. You could have quietly called the gate yourself and reported Mark for offering a bribe. You did nothing. I know, sir. I'm sorry. I believe in second chances, Beth. I do not believe in third ones. You are being enrolled in the new B-37 training module, followed by 12 weeks of retraining. You will be on probation for 1 year. You will learn to trust the policy over the purser. If you can do that, you have a future here. If you can't, you don't. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. She wept, relieved. 6 months later, Julian Vance was on a short flight from LaGuardia to Chicago. He was in 1A. The plane was full. Boarding was almost complete when a man in an expensive suit, talking loudly on his phone, rushed onto the plane. He glanced at his pass, which read 2D. He looked at the empty seat next to Julian, 1D, which was being held for crew rest. Hey, the man said to the flight attendant Maria. Can I just take this one? More legroom. I'm Platinum Elite. Julian didn't even look up from his report. He just listened. Maria, a new hire who had just passed her B-37 module, didn't even blink. Sir, your assigned seat is 2D. This seat is reserved. Come on, the man scoffed. What's the big deal? No one's in it. Just let me sit there. Maria stepped into the aisle, blocking his path. Her voice was firm, polite, and absolutely final. Sir, the policy is clear. Please take your assigned seat, 2D. If you refuse, you will be in violation of crew instructions, and I will be forced to have you removed from this aircraft. The man stared, stunned by her directness. He looked for an ally, a Mark, who would appease him. He saw only a flight attendant with a spine of steel. Fine, geez, just asking, he grumbled. He shuffled past her and squeezed into 2D. Maria turned to Julian. Mr. Vance, welcome aboard. Can I get you a coffee before takeoff? Julian looked up from his report. He gave her a small, genuine smile. Thank you, Maria. That would be perfect. He leaned back and closed his eyes. The cabin door sealed. The ship was turning. What you just heard isn't just a story about a bad passenger. It's a story about power. Caroline Harding thought her privilege gave her power. The flight crew thought their authority gave them power. But they were all wrong. True power isn't about yelling the loudest or having the most expensive handbag. It's about quiet conviction. It's about knowing your worth and holding your ground. Julian Vance didn't raise his voice. He raised the standard. He showed that karma isn't some magical force. It's the result of choices. The crew made their choice. Caroline made hers. And Julian, he made his. This is what happens when entitlement meets true authority. The system isn't always fair. But as this story shows, sometimes, just sometimes, the right person is in the right seat at the right time. What did you think of the crew's decision? Was Julian's response too extreme, or was it exactly what needed to be done? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories about justice and karma, make sure you hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more true life stories where the powerful are held accountable.